Hi, everyone.
Good evening. We can hear you.
Yes. Are we on time?
Yes, yes, we are. We said we'll be
Oh,
giving people at least 5 minutes to log in. Yes.
okay. I think 14, a few more numbers, but we can start maybe just a bit of recap where we are, and then we just move on. Just give me a few minutes, 1 minute. Okay. Apologies. Yes. As we wait for the rest, I think maybe we can just do a quick summary, which I'm not going to ask you to do. I think I'll be able to do it where we are. And I think maybe I need to mention that today by the end of it, we may just extend slightly a bit so that we have some assignments. And this assignment would be both individual and of course group work. I'll be able to maybe give details of this just at the end of it. But in terms of recap, I think last class we mentioned the different types of indicators, and we had looked at them. I'm not going to dwell much onto them. We focused much on the developmental project level indicators. And on this one, we had gone the last class. For those who are not there, some of the key questions that comes up normally when you're looking at the developmental perspective, and of course, the steps that those aligns with. We talked about answering the question of why the project, which is basically looking at the statement of the project, and then of course also trying to reflect on what the impact, which basically articulates the two levels of results. And of course, that is articulation of long-term development objectives and sometimes more aligned to impact specific level indicators. Purposely why the project has been designed, we say is covered under what will it achieve. Remember, the project has normally what will be the long-term objectives and why is it purposely designed. This one would be looking at intermediate objectives. Forget about the terminology effect indicators. If you like, it suits you, then that is also okay. Some people use those terms. Then the short one, that is, the other two, that is what would the impact and what you'd achieve a bit longer. Then immediately after this, after every other intervention, what would it really produce? Which we said are the expected output, and this focuses on the output level indicator, very critical. Aligned to the indicators at the output level are normally activities that allows you to be able to perform that. So this would be looking at the lowest level of indicators, many times activity level indicators, which many times don't come in, output level indicators, and of course, resources that are required to do this. But remember, along the results hierarchy, don't worry about the terminology. I would be able to define it. They are normally assumptions, those external factors that you have no control, but they actually affect the results. We normally talk about assumptions. So in defining the result hierarchy, assumptions are really, really very critical, as we looked at last time. So this is why I've gone back there very critically, because this one I'm going to tie with looking at indicators. So what about the developmental objective? I'm now focused on the two. Now, we may have defined it somewhere, but more clarity comes here. That is, this is the overall objective of the project and is meant to contribute to, or the project is meant to contribute to in the long run as the impact. In other words, what it would be attributable for. And remember what it would be attributable for. Sometimes we talk about the positive part and of course the negative part. But developmental is normally what you call the positive part, like change livelihood or improve livelihood. You might get limitations in improving the livelihood, but that is not really the idea. You would always want to see a positive change into that. So it should be used as the main point of reference and should be clearly written. Now, focus on these words because these words are really going to be critical. Okay, I thought somebody was speaking. So let's focus on these words because they are really going to be very critical as we move ahead. It should be clearly written and should not be too ambiguous and too broad. So in other words, we say it must really be smart. Some word smart is actually going to come in, and we are going to talk about that. It should be expressed in verifiable terms. You know, this is what we say, the means of verification. You don't just say it. So when you are saying it, you really need to know, is it traceable to that point? It should be written in a manner that immediate objectives will significantly contribute to achieving the development objectives. So let me clarify that. We are saying is the long-term perspective. But then to get there, the specific objective or purpose of the project that comes in. So this is the point that I'm trying to clarify here. It represents a sufficient justification for the project. So that long-term change that we're looking for justify the need for that particular project. In fact, if you are writing a proposal to the partner, this is the reason. You would be saying, it would bring this change and it would actually be conducted to meet this specific objective. So that's justify that. It should be expressed as a desired end and not as a means. Now, this word is critical. Look at it, because framing of your objectives would be very critical, or your impact statement would be very critical. Let me repeat it. It should be expressed as a desired end and not as a means. Many times, like we talk about, in the education sector, what is the long term? The desired end, not the means. In other words, means you still have to do something to be able to get there. But we are saying in the end, once it has been done, this is what we'll be talking about. We are talking about maybe change livelihood as a result of education. That is the end result. But to get a change livelihood, classes like this one have to be attended. Some other things really need to be done to get us to attending the class. And once you have attended the class, then we'll be saying perhaps that is where we want to end at the end of it. So look at it. That is the expression of the development or impact statement in itself. Okay, so let's move on. Now, to follow that, is actually what we call the immediate objectives, or some people would prefer to refer to it as the purpose of that particular intervention. So let me just go through the words here, then I clarify. The immediate objective sets out the operational purpose of the project. So you have the changes, long-term changes that are indeed expected from this. You may get there, you may not necessarily get there, but there is really attribution because impact is indeed a longer period of it. So here we are saying it sets up the operational purpose of the project. And this one is a must condition. Every other intervention that has been designed, and of course, some results are actually expected, even if you are going to report to the donor. This is a condition, it must really be met. For the impact, you may be left because it takes a longer period of time and a lot of survey have to be done. But this has to be realized. Of course, it also calls for a survey, but it must be realized. So it gives the anticipated achievement of the project, but is outside the project direct control. In other words, we are saying, what I mean, outside the direct control of the project. That is the purpose. But you are saying to get there, you must do these particular activities which will give you certain outputs. Activities you have control. And the deliverables or immediate results, which we call the outputs of those activities, from there you have no control. But you can control activities because you can say how many people will attend, where is the location for this. But once the activities has been done, like this class, we have control. Let me use this as an example. We have control how many participants. We have control when classes are being done. But once class participants have come and classes have been attended, what you do with the learnings here, we have no control. That's the first. We are saying the immediate output of this class. We would really have no control over it, but we have control of the class attendance and the participation. Anything that comes as a result, again, attributable, again, for this class, we have no control. So this is what I'm saying here. It gives the anticipated achievement of the project, but is outside the project direct control. So it's really outside our intervention, but it's sort of attribution going forward for that. It will determine the magnitude of the project in terms of resources and strategy, and it should, again, not be too ambiguous and unclear. This will become clear as we are moving on, don't worry. So it is likely to occur when the project outputs have been produced or have been completed. This is what I say. There's that linkage of hierarchy in the result chain, which I will talk about later. A project should have only one intermediate objective. Maybe yes or no, that is debatable, but for now I'm saying one. But remember, you are not confined to that, depending on what you intend to deliver. But critical to this, again, pause here a bit, look at the framing of the impact, and then look at the framing of the outcome, what I'm calling the immediate objective. So bear in mind, it should be formulated as a desired state. The key word is a desired state, not as a process. The other one, we say desired end game, but here we are saying a desired state, that if you are here, then there's a likelihood that desired end game should come. Remember that, because that is really how the objectives intermediate or purpose statement actually formulated. It should be precisely and verifiably defined, just like the other one. So these are very key words you must bear in mind, and we'll do it on our own. What about the output that delivers the intermediate outcome and the developmental objective? Are the result that can be guaranteed by the project and consequences of its as a result of the consequences of activity. So here we are saying, let me use this again to explain. We can guarantee that this number of participants actually can attend or would by the end of this this program have attended this course. We can guarantee, because this one we have control over. But the result of that, which is really the intermediate purpose or the objective, we have no control. So the result that can be guaranteed as a consequence of its activity. Ensure that all essential output for achieving the project objectives are included. We are going to discuss this, and this is where our assignment comes in. For you to get a specific, one single objectives could have multiple outputs, and multiple output could have several activities. And going forward, those several objectives that we have, or the outcome, would again have or just contribute to one single impact or statement, or simply one goal of the project. So bear that in mind. We'll go through the vertical matrix, the horizontal matrix of that result hierarchy, so that you understand it very well. Now, that only the output can be guaranteed by the project management are included. Remember, you can plan for many things. You can do many things within the project, but some of them are not aligned to the result, or some of them are more processes. So when you talk about result-based, we say, if you do A should be able to give you these results, and you should be able to link your activities that way. Ensures that all outputs are feasible within the resources that are available. Sometimes we overplan and we are not seeing whether the resources are there, whether it's technically viable. So we are saying overall, it should really, the output or the activity should first of all be feasible, because if they are feasible, then even the output are likely to be feasible. Ensures that they are precisely and verifiably defined, just like the others. Can be seen as a necessary. Now see this. So this is another statement to bear in mind. Can be seen as a necessary means to achieving the immediate objective. In other words, if you frame it and you find that it is giving you the end game, then know something is amiss. It should be a means that then you keep asking the question. So after you've done this, so what? It should take you somewhere. And of course, that should lead you to the end game that we talked about, the developmental objective. So this is really critical to be able to understand. And that should be able to give you what I said, activities there. Is an action, we have defined this, which is necessary to transform given inputs into planned output within a specified period. Now, critical to activities, ensure all activity necessary to produce the outputs are all included. For the assignments, we will not do all, but for your practice, you may try to include all. And we're actually going to just pick any case project within the group. I think Rita would guide us somewhere there how the groups would be formed, so that we try to do what is in group, and what is coming from the group is what will transform into individual work. Now, ensure that all activities contribute directly to the output. That linkages, you must be able to see it. So you say if else statement, we are going to use if else statement. If A is to be done, then B should really happen. And if B happens, C should follow almost immediately. Now, ensure that only activities that to be performed by the project are included. Now, look at how they are stated again. Are stated in terms of action. So you have to bear this again in mind. This is a point to remember. Ensure that your activities are framed as actions. That's a way again to look at it. Being undertaken rather than completed. Now, when they are completed, they sound like output. Conduct a midterm review by the end of this duration. You see, hold a performance evaluation. And once you have held that, so what next? Something should really happen. So they must really be action oriented, or we use action words. I'm happy that majority of us are teachers. So you know what the doing words, the action words are acceptable in terms of economic. Now, this is something that when you're doing what you call feasibility studies, so to speak, you must ensure that they are acceptable in terms of economics, that they have make economic sense, socially acceptable. Socially acceptable means do no harm, and of course have moral grounds. Some of you may have heard this word, social safeguard. We might want to talk about it later. Just try to introduce it as a way of trying to understand some of the things that are emerging today. So later on, we shall be able to talk about what are some of these emerging issues in M&E, the social safeguard, environmental safeguard, and how do you take care of it within your environment. So this is really very critical. The framing words, formulation of goals, formulations of outcomes, formulations of output, and formulation of activities become very useful. Now, and this is where now what I'm going to tie with what is next. So again, bear in mind, we have looked at the formulation, but key along those, when we are looking at the results, also going to be critical are what are the indicators that align to those particular results. And remember, every other indicator must have a means of verification, and there must also be certain assumptions. Don't worry, we're going to talk about the same. So ensure that each planning level represent a set of indicators, and the planning levels are the ones that have aligned here. So indicators are signs or numerical numbers or description that shows changes. We have defined that at progress, and these are the levels of the planning levels. The impact level, which we talked about, the development objective, just to rephrase that. Outcome or effect level, we talked about it. We talked about intermediate objectives, and that's where they are. Output level, output of the project activities. And of course, these are now how you do the activities. So if you want to read it downwards, read it downwards. If you want to read it up, the downward is for planning and the upward is actually for implementation. What I mean by that is like, once you have known your impact, because that's where you start, and you have known the outcomes that to deliver that, and you have known the several output that delivers a particular outcome or all of them, then you have to come up with activities, and activities must have resources to be able to implement the same. And this is, I've just framed that into what I was calling the different levels. So you can see the impact level indicators is going to be our key thing here. Intermediate objectives, outcome level indicators, output level indicators. And if you like, which many times we don't go into because they would really make your work to be a bit minute, schedules or simply activity level or input level indicators. By the way, just to confirm, are you all seeing my screen? I want to be sure. Maybe I've gone ahead. Are you all seeing my screen? Can I get the confirmation?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
Okay, fine. That's great. If you don't get anything, or I might be assuming that everybody's seeing, please just stop me. But I'm happy you are seeing. So let me move to the next. Or if there's any reaction there, maybe let me conclude here, then I get reaction. So I have just talked about this. Look at it from the implementation and then coming down to what we intend to achieve. So the implementation is what I simply say, the input level indicator. But we also have process, which many times we don't capture, processes. Like for this class, there are a number of things that have to be done to get us to maybe today's class. The link had to be, the link had to be created. And that is one part of the process for undertaking this class. So if you're looking at some of the process indicator to do this, then you can talk about this. And that process input plus the process, several processes that have gone into this have brought us certain, by the end of the day, we should be able to get some output indicators. If you are to look at it, then we can say, By the end of today's session, right now I'm seeing we are 25. We could say maybe 25 participants attended today's class. Now, one output only, that particular output that I've mentioned, cannot deliver a single outcome, cannot deliver single outcome. We need several output to be able to get in there. And several outcome would also give us the impact. And that is what we are calling more of impact indicator. So again, read it the way you are. If you talk about this, we can be talking about actions, reactions, and of course the purpose. And that is how it really goes into. I'll jump this part, more or less what I've done, but at least trying to digest what you need there. So let me go to the next. I've just tried to put this in terms of some diagram. So look at the baseline. You know, even if you're looking at the indicators, you need a baseline, the starting point, situation before. This is what I showed in the diagram in terms of the output, if you're seeing this. And then, of course, from the output, we talked about to allow you to do certain activities, which are basically indicators. And this is really referring to the indicator framework. You need these activities or activity level indicator to be able to get certain outputs. And this output can give you 1, 2, 3 outcome. Now, the effect I said, they could be more direct, and there are also those that are spillovers. There is also what is intended in terms of what comes and the unintended. And all these really, when you're doing an evaluation, should be so direct or indirect, effect of that. That basically talks about the impact level indicators. Okay, so I don't know whether there is some reaction to where we are before I go into indicators for M&D, because this is really going to be the gist of why we are in this class. Is there any reaction? If none, then I would proceed. Any reaction? Okay, let's proceed. Now, we have talked about this, but I'm just repeating, I'm reminding ourselves because it is leading us somewhere. So they provide the quantitative and qualitative details about sets of objectives. They are statement about the situation that will exist when an objective is reached. They provide evidence of progress of a program or activities as in the attainment of the developmental objectives. Now, critical steps to developing them, because we are going to develop them. And in that case, an assumption that I'm making that we have also developed our objectives, our outcome, our output, and of course, coming down to activities. So how then do we develop indicators? Step 1 to consider. Identify the problem or situation you are trying to address. That is very critical. Develop a vision on how you'd like the problem areas to look like. Develop a process vision, how you'd want things to be achieved. Develop indicators for effectiveness and develop indicators for your efficiency targets and so on. So these are things just to bear in mind. Okay, criteria for selecting them. And this is where the word sometimes SMART indicators comes in. Relevant to the needs and capability of the user. In other words, it must really meet the purpose why you do. Some projects have too many indicators that are, most of them become irrelevant. So we are saying, even for you to lead to that word SMART, the word even meeting the needs and the capability for the user should be there. It should be easy to collect, use, and understand. You know, there's no need of putting an indicator that you will not have access to. Bear that in mind. And you're actually going to use it, and it is easy to understand. Clarity of definition, remember that every other time you have an indicator, context change and the understanding from one environment to the other is different. So it would really be very critical for, the people that have formulated this indicator to define, give a definition. What does it mean? Because it may vary from one environment to the other. Sensitive to record changes induced by the project, independent of each other. Now, this is critical. We say, the fewer the indicator, the better. But the more they are, the likely or the higher the chances of dependency. In other words, you're likely to find that one indicator is more or less repeated somewhere. So ensure across your result framework or your log frame, as many people would want to call it, all the indicators are unique to each other, because then you would be removing the duplication that would have happened. So as few as possible, concentrating on measuring important project features while avoiding over-aggregation. What we are saying here, anything can be an indicator, but just select a few. In fact, we use the word key performance indicator, meaning as many as they may be, we may not go into all of them, but what are key to the changes that we're actually looking for? In fact, in alignment with result-based. And this is the smart perspective that I talked about, looking at some of the issues here when. So bear this in mind. I'm just giving an example how these have been taken care of. By September, of course, is bringing in timely where, who, what, how much, what to do. In other words, you are simply saying you must check that all this information is indeed available. And these are some of the words that example that has just been given to be able to describe the same. Maybe I think this is more or less similar to what I've mentioned. So let me jump it equally to this part. And then, of course, just go straight here. Again, very critical. We have said SMART, but what does it mean when we say SMART? A properly stated objective is action-oriented, start with the word to, and is followed by an action verb. The objective addresses question of what. Now, this is critical. Remember, we talked about impact, that is asking the question why. Why the project? The objective or the purpose level, we say it should bring in the question of what then do we do? If we know the why, the changes that the long-term changes that we expect, you cannot do everything. Then we start asking the question, then what will it do? So that is what the developing objective in terms of the formulation looks at. But, okay, and when, but not why or how. The why here is actually the impact, and the how here is the doing part is really output level. We had talked about this. They are stated in terms of result to be achieved. That's desired state, not process or activity to be performed. Now, some things to look at. Objective, who is going to do what, when, and when you do it, and how it will be measured. And I've given some example here which you can look at. So just a typical example, at the end of 3 days training session, that is talking about where workshop participant or the class participant who will infuse quantitative reasoning in one course, what, and determined by a survey attributed and all that. So critically look at it. That is basically how you go about it. And I've given several examples just to be able to guide you. But what you see here may not be good. Formulating this on your own is really, really critical, and we shall critique and we shall be able to debate more about it. Now, clarity of the objectives. Ask the right question to gather information, prioritize requirements, leave buffer to change in the designs, and have a clear set of KPIs with which to measure that particular success. That is what brings clarity there. It describes in terms of the purpose, it describes the desired outcome. Remember, we talked about this, that the object will achieve. This should be clear and brief. I've just brought in some good example here to help. Improve river water quality. You see, improve, this is, the desired state. We want to improve river water quality. Now, the other question, end game would be, so what about, so why are we improving water quality? There is something behind that. So in other words, this is really the desired state, but when we have reached the desired state, what comes out of it? Maybe we aim to reduce incidences of diseases. So think about the same. So the difference here. Objectives are more specific and more achievable compared to project goal. Of course, project goal are broader. The real difference between a goal and objective is the specificity and the level of achievement. The goal is not specific and it can usually not be achieved during the lifetime. Well, let me say it is not always that you not achieve it. What we are saying, a well-planned one, because at the end of the course or this course that we are saying, the objective, some of you, maybe depending on what you aimed for, may have been achieved. Others would have achieved it later. But if we are to do the evaluation of what we have planned this for, we may find, there is some attribution to what indeed is intended. So we are saying the longer term would be achieved over time. Of course, there will be small elements of achievements as we are heading there, but broadly, it will take some time for us to be able to say that we have achieved what we had planned for. It is always very specific and it has to be achieved during the set period. I said this one must be met. If the objective of the course must be met, the impact or the effect of the course would be must sometimes after, and indeed after an evaluation. I think all these are just some examples to be able to help you against what you have gone through. So you can take some times and actually just look at the framing and see whether it works with you with the cases that we're actually going to pick here. Now, so this is just for your work again. It's not the assignment. And of course, within your group, we are going to practice the same. So just pick a project of your work environment, develop its vision. Actually, this is the first assignment. And I think Rita would be able to share it with you. I'll read it here, but again, two ways, group and of course individual. For groups, you would basically do what is individual, and group is to help you in the discussion. So then you can borrow the learnings from those groups and bring it to the individual. So what you do in assignment 1 is basically to come up with a logical framework. Of course, there are some terminologies there that you're also going to define and formulate indicators the following level. An assumption that I've said there is you already formulated the objectives, the objective hierarchy, which has the purpose or simply the goal, of course, the outcome and all this, and it would follow some path. I've given a format that we're going to use and we have not discussed that. So that's why I will not go into it. So monitoring indicators, I say 2 levels, normally input and output, and of course, come up with our evaluation indicator. Basically, what I'm saying, just come up with that result hierarchy or objective hierarchy as it's called, and put it in a 4x4 matrix. That is the log frame. We are going to, I think we may have defined it somewhere in terms of this. So it may look something like this. This is one good example, but the one that I've given is a 4x4. This is a 5. If you are to count, we have this column here. Look at it. Let me just go back a bit. I think it jumped. So we have, look at the project description. This column here is sometimes what you call result hierarchy or result level. So normally goal, sometimes people talk about this. We have defined all these terms. I'm not going to repeat it. Some people talk about the purpose, or some people combine the two, purpose and of course component objectives. Component objectives, some projects have components, some don't have. So in this case, I've just brought one that had component. If the component was not there, then you'll go to the purpose, or if you framed it in terms of result, you'll be talking about objectives here, you'll be talking about the outcome here, and of course the outputs and activity follows there. The next column that you have there, the key KPIs. The KPIs must align to the goal or the result hierarchy here, but critical for this, how is it formulated? This is the key thing that we're actually going to do. It does not follow the way I'm reading it here, but for now, just add it. So performance indicator, each and every level of result must have the key performance indicator, and each indicator must have the means of evidence, the means of verification. And the last column, as you actually look at each results or each level, each indicator, it must have some assumption, or rather each level of result must have some assumptions. And we're actually going to look at how this is again also formulated. Now, so that ends there. Let me hear if there are certain reaction, because I'm going to go to the next part where we have an assignment. So let me get some reactions before I go to this part here. Any reactions that you have, something that is not clear, you need me to clarify as I go to this, if any, because I'm going to tie that to this particular one. Are you able to see my screen once again?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So if that is okay, let me continue. It's a continuation of this. So bear in mind that that particular assignment, but I'm going to add one more or 2, 3 more actually alongside this, plus the individual one. So I think some of these maybe I've talked about them. Let me just try to jump a few here. Now, when you talk about the framework here, because this is where we are going, I would be more concerned about the result framework. I would be more concerned about the logical framework and of course, the logical model and this. These are actually going to be very critical for us. So results, we had defined it somewhere. Explain how our project strategic objective, that is result framework, strategic objectives to be achieved, including those results that are necessary and sufficient, as well as their causal effect relationship. The logical model, how does one intervention from the other lead to the other? A program design, management, and evaluation tool that describe the main elements of a programs and how these elements work together to reach a particular goal. We are going to see them. The logical framework, this is the one that I want to confine most, and this is where our assignments is. We had defined it before, but just to refresh. A diagram or a matrix that illustrates the linear relationship between key program results hierarchy. Simply inputs, activity, outputs, outcomes, and of course, this. And then we may look at how that brings it into the result chain. Now, so where is the logic in any particular intervention? So there should be, when you talk about the logical framework, the logic of that framework. So there should be a certain logical relationship in the way the project has been designed between inputs, activity, output, and how these lead to achieving objectives. So we talk about the logical intervention or the logic in implementation. That means you say, if you do this, they should be able to lead to the other one, and they should be able to lead to the next and all that. So there should be some logical sequence of that. This relationship is captured in the logical framework, which summarizes the logical relations between different levels that I've just talked about there. So we don't need to repeat that. Okay. I wanted to put it in a presentation mode so then you are able to see together with me. So we said they are basically a diagram that identifies and illustrates the linear relationship flowing from program input all the way to the outcome. It is a dynamic tool that can be used to assess and revise a project as a circumstance changes. It lies at the heart of the project and establishes a clear hierarchy of objectives from the different levels that you have just mentioned. Input or resource affect processes or activity which produces immediate results, like you have said before, or outputs, ultimately leading to longer term objectives. Now, look at this diagram. I think this diagram is a bit interesting. Let me try to limit my window if there's anything I can be able to see. Look at this sequence here. So the understanding here is the two terms, logical frame of working. This is what I've brought in for you. The logical, which means organizing some sequence. The frame is confined it within some, way of context there, and then the work is do the job. So logical frame of working, which basically simply means put it in a sequential way and do the job. So that is the terminology. If you have to put logical framework in simple terms, that's how you should be able to view it. Now, so the logical framework cycle operations still take us to that programming cycle which we had looked at. I just wanted to bring this to your attention so then you see it still continues into that. And a lot of things that I may want you to do here. Remember, we talked about programming, what it entails, identification, what it entails, formulation, implementation, and of course, evaluation. So let's not repeat it because we have talked about this. Now, how it evolved, maybe I think this is a bit historical. Let me leave it for you just to read how it has evolved over time. But the important part here, it is useful for guiding the design and the implementation. And it's, in fact, people call it the thinking analysis. When you are formulating the logical framework, there's going to be a lot of thinking. And we are going to see the different layers of thinking, the vertical thinking, the horizontal thinking, and of course, any other thinking that we may really see there. It analyzes the existing situation during activity preparations and establishes a long hierarchy of means by which objective will be reached. Now, using the logical framework approach imposes rigor in assessing what is to be achieved and the assumption that is behind that particular intervention. Now, it identifies the potential risks that is on the assumption part to achieving objective and sustainable outcome. That is now when you formulate the assumption based on the risk. Establishes how output and outcome might be monitored and evaluated. And it also presents a summary of activities in a standard format. Can be used to monitor and review activity during implementation. You know, that is what we call the course corrective measure. Now, the basic idea, be clear about what you want to achieve and how it will be achieved. Now, that is what I'm saying first, the formulation. Think about why. And in thinking about the why, then of course, formulate the end game, the impact, what will be the end game for this. Decide how you will know you are achieving your objectives and put it in a monitoring system. The lowest level activities or input activities and output must be the first. So decide how you know you are achieving your objectives. You will know with the immediate results, which is the output. And the output is dictated by the activities and of course the resources that goes with that. At that point, then you would have started establishing your monitoring system. In other words, the monitoring system talks about the how, the input, out activities, and the output. And then, of course, we are saying make explicit the conditions, that is the assumptions, outside the control of the project that are critical for the implementation or success, and assess the risks for the project if this condition fail to arise. What I'm saying here, we are saying, first of all, look at the risks that will prevent you from doing this, and you frame them in the positive. We are saying friendly government policies. And we are saying if the government policies are friendly, then you cannot move to the next level. In other words, that project is not feasible. So you go with an assumption that indeed government policies are. So what is going to happen? You have to work to ensure that the policies are friendly for you to achieve the next level. So when you go with that assumption, if risks, let's say, maybe they are chaos and the policy becomes unfriendly, then you would not possibly, the project is no longer feasible. But if this is detected before the intervention, then you can actually come in your PA, what you call the project appraisal report, and say it's not feasible. Not feasible because of what? A, B, C, D. But if it comes midway, those are now what you call risk during the implementation, and you always put mitigation strategies. So then you do not really stop. And of course, many projects have been affected with this and they have continued. Some have delivered. Many times partners would actually give an extension with the proper justification for why those reasons happening. So establish the general scope or focus of that and agree on the planning framework, which you are calling the logical framework, terminology and design. Now, terminologies here are very key. It must be understood to the partners. It must be understood to the stakeholders. So then we are all together. And attack a detailed situational analysis. So perform this situational analysis to be able to know where are you today? How feasible is it? And of course, going forward, would you be able to do that? Develop the strategy, project strategy. Strategy would come in many forms, and of course, how to operationalize that strategy, including some of the tools we are talking about. Identify and analyze the assumptions and risks chosen for the strategy, modify the design if the assumptions are incorrect or risks are too high. In fact, some people talk about risk ranking. And you'll be able to find in certain projects, they say favorable or less risks. And of course, in that case, it's justified to be able to continue. And then we are saying, as you're doing that, develop the monitoring and evaluation framework. So out of the logical framework, we're also going to see there's a monitoring plan and there's an evaluation plan. And the three I have actually captured in the assignment, both individual and of course, the group level. Now, so how do you formulate this? This is where something that I may want to dwell in, and I was actually in a way moving to this part. Now, is the written output? I've just used different word, but the critical part is bullet 2. Standard matrix is a table with 4 rows and 4 columns. It's not always the case. You are likely to come across those 4 by 4, 4 by 5, 6 by whatever, anything. But for now, let's use what is in the definition. Most people talk about, or standard definition is a 4 by 4 matrix. What that means is 4 columns and 4 rows, and we just define them. The results hierarchy, key performance indicators, means of verification, and the assumption column. That makes it a 4 by 4 matrix. And of course, coming down in results, we have the impact, we have the outcomes, we have the output, and of course, we have the activity. So that makes it a 4 in the vertical column, and in the horizontal column, we have another 4 columns there. Now, so these columns are important because they detail what the project should achieve from the level of an overall goal down to specific activity. The performance questions, which is really very critical, indicator will be used to monitor progress and overall achievement. How the indicator will be monitored and how data will be found, that is really talking about the means of verification. So the means of verification is basically referring to how they will be monitored, but more so what data, how would data really be collected and how is it going to be packaged? So we are saying if asked, how did you know this is the change? Then you have to show your evidence of that. the assumption behind the logic of how the activity will eventually contribute to the goal, and the associated risk. We have just talked about the 7. So look at this. More or less again repeated, but now bringing it to that particular terminology. So I have just bringing in, we have defined the goal, we have defined the purpose. So let's not again repeat it because we have defined it. But again, going to look at our own example, how it fits into the framework. Now, all this we have talked about, and then eventually, these examples. So reframe what I talked about and how those terminologies that I've talked about is actually put into the framework here. Now, so again, look at this. So this is another way. I've just put it in another layout. So then you see the other perspective of this. When you're looking at these terminologies, the goal, the purpose, the output, also think about the geographical and of course time scope, because this also dictates what we defined there. The goal is so broad, but again, we are saying it is long term in terms of the duration. If you're talking about a project that is 5 years, maybe from 3rd year onward, that's when you'll be able to talk about it. The purpose or the outcome level, whatever term that you do, the objective limit, we are saying compared to the goal is not that broad, it's a bit limited. The limited might be ambiguous word, but simply see, we are saying the other one is much broader, but this is more specific. And because of that, the time limit for this should be more or less at the end of the project. It should really have been realized. The output, we are saying again, when we are saying the other one is more specific, then this other one is even much shorter, more limited in terms of what it should be able to do. And then, of course, in terms of the duration compared to the purpose or the objective is much shorter. You can realize this almost immediately after a particular intervention. And of course, the activity level or simply the output is more immediate, almost instant, really from that. So that is another perspective that I wanted to talk about this. We have talked about all these things again, and just see how you are picking them and putting into the log frame for practice. But critical is this. Now, so I talked about the vertical logic. Let me take you back. So this is what, let me take you back a little bit. Now, this column that you're seeing here is the vertical, this takes care of the vertical logic, and this column that goes up here takes care of the horizontal, thinking, if you like, or the horizontal matrix. So coming down to what I just went here, now, so the vertical hierarchy, look at it, what is coming downwards. Of a log frame has a direct relationship to the incremental step of achieving the objective from the activities at the bottom to the overall outcome. In other words, it increments. If you do all these together, then we shall keep going up to the higher level. The relationship between the initiatives, which are basically the activities undertaken by the project, and ultimately their impact on whatever interventions, the project itself, policy level, and anything that has been used. This column tests the means to end relationship. The end, we already talked about the impact. It requires vertical thinking. So this is the other thinking that I brought in, and you have to bear this in mind. So for you to formulate the results objectives, that is the impact to output to activity level or input level, you have to think vertically. So think of it vertically. That means if this is the why question, then the why question should be able to bring the what questions, and the what question should be able to bring the how question. And the how question basically is the output and of course the activity, if you like, plus the resources. So think of that. You are always going to think vertically. It's structured and as a longer term view with a clear end position. Now, so see it here. This is how the implementation approach. So the thinking analysis. Think of this the vertical way. So this is the vertical thinking that I've just talked about. So in this case, what are we saying? Look at it. We are saying if it stands up in terms of the implementation. So in other words, remember you plan downwards and now you are trying to operationalize, check whether that thinking is really okay. So you are thinking the vertical thinking analysis. If it stands up in the sense that the input allows you to do the activities and all the activities align to 1, 2, 3 objectives, outputs, and all 1, 2, 3 outputs align to a particular outcome and 1, 2, 3 outcome align to the goal, then we are saying you are thinking the right way and the vertical alignment really exists. And when you look at it here, you'll be seeing all these activities would give us this particular output. But from output level, certain outcomes would also try to begin to show, which basically gives the objective. Remember, we talked about the purpose for that. And of course, the wider or the broader objective that we talked about. If you like, you can also put it in this other way: input, activities, output, outcomes, and of course, the logical model. This is what we are saying. But remember the planning, you plan from the right, coming to the left. Implementation, implement from, is it from the left going to the right? So that is the logical model. The logic in that intervention is put this activity in place, allows you to do these activities. It will give you the immediate results, the output, and those output will give you, some people call them results, some people call them just outcome. And of course, you are likely to get why that particular intervention was done. I'll put it again in another way to allow you to think. See the inputs, which allows you to do the activities. And if you're able to do that, then of course, let me just project that. It will produce certain outputs. I see, okay, I see one hand up here. Hussein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Facilitator Walter. Kindly, a little bit, just clarify between the input, no, the output and the outcome in a layman language, please.
Okay. So in a layman's language, let me start from top so then we get it again. We are saying impact are basically the long-term changes after an intervention. Many times you may not realize them immediately. But when you are planning at the end of that intervention, call it a strategic plan, there's immediate result. There's the purpose of that strategic plan. In this case, then we talk about the objectives and to formulate results from that. These results are basically what we are calling the outcome. So we are saying, let me repeat again, going upward so then you understand it. We are saying from the objectives that we wanted, certainly there are certain changes that we want. Let me bring my case. Africa CDC, where I am, is a continental health agency. We actually implement a lot of health interventions within the continent. And you've heard about this. Let's start with COVID-19 that was there. The whole thing is to ensure to safer continent, safer and secure continent. Look, that terminology itself is really very broad. So you can break it down. What do you mean by safer and secure continent? Okay, so that is like, when we start talking about that, in terms of the impact, we'll be saying free or reduced maternal health, let's say like that. That is already one aspect of a demo that indeed we are actually safer continent. It may not be the only one, but they could be safer. But what did we do to be able to get there? I'm still talking about maternal may not necessarily be linked to COVID, but think of it that way. So what did we do? We must have done A and B to ensure that we are there. So our purpose was, let's say, establish National Public Health Institute in every country. That is one thing that Africa CDC does. And when we are doing this, what are we saying? We're actually ensuring to access to health facilities. Access alone by just having National Public Health Institute may not be the case. We also need the workforce. So when we have the clinic officers, we have the hostel around where people actually get all this treatment and diagnostics and all the rest. Maybe yes or no, we can reduce maternal, maternal mortality, but that alone, that intervention alone may not be the case. There are several others that we can. But what did we aim? Now, we were targeting reduced maternal. There is a specific thing that we plan to be able to do this. So our purpose, our main objective was this. Remember, there are several ways of tackling maternal health reduction, but we focused on this one as our purpose to be able to get there. So that tells you about the purpose or the outcome here. In other words, therefore, we are saying for you to get to the outcome, outcomes are what we call intermediate results. That means you must be able to have done certain things to be able to deliver you there. And these certain things are what we are calling output. I will bring you back again to where you'll be able to understand it. So outputs are more of immediate deliverable, tangible results that if they are done, then you can really count that you are more or less going to deliver on your purpose or why that particular project was designed. They are all results, but look at the longevity of each, the time frame. So we are saying output are more immediate, but they are still results that if you do one in terms of activities, we say the actions. The activities are still results, but action oriented. So if we have this number of participants, let me use that as an example. By the end of today, our immediate output would be, we have 31 participants. Okay, let me use that. But what was it? Facilitation, today's facilitations. How many students or how many people actually attended today's class? So we'll be saying the output of that or the answer to that, we had 31 that I'm actually seeing here attended today's session. Now, what is going to happen after today's? It is a different thing. We'll be saying many people have used what they learned today, perhaps tomorrow in their work. Now, was that the purpose? I'm sure you came up with all of us, we have different needs. And I think during the class time, we had indicated the expectation. So this might just be a one contributor to your expectation. Some wanted to change the job. Some actually say because of their work environment, they're really compelled to be able to do that. So check, is it really meeting the objective why you're in this particular course? But remember, as an institution, again, we have our purpose to be able to deliver quality product for you. So while you are checking whether your purpose has been met, we'll also be checking whether we delivered on why we intended or we purposely meant to be there. I don't know whether that clarifies what you had asked for. Or have I confused you more?
No. I'm somewhere now.
Okay, okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other? Any other? All right. Ask a question because it's an interesting one and it's debatable because formulation is actually going to be very different across board. Now, I've used some examples just to demonstrate that. Maybe this could also help clarify. And I knew that. So let's look at the change that we want. And this change may not come as a result of just one outcome, just one output, just one process or the activity. I've used it. Declining morbidity level in target population is a very high pain. Maybe in respect to Africa CDC, we want to see declining morbidity as a result of ill health. Maybe that's what we target. So one of the results we may have tied to contribute to that, it may not necessarily on its own contribute to declining morbidity. So we'll be saying, we want to see, we work on workforce, ensuring the continental workforce. So we want to ensure the health professionals are actually well-trained and well-equipped. So in your own view, do you think if we increased the number of professionals in health facilities who are highly trained, I want you to figure out, if we increase clients served by newly trained health providers, do you think this may contribute to declining morbidity as one issue? What's your thought? I've just used, it's not exhaustive, but it's just one example that I put in. I have several examples. Maybe this is not your line, but what do you think? Okay, let me go across board. Then the other thing we are saying, how will you ensure by newly trained? Then we are saying the immediate results of that, let's say 25 practitioners trained in new clinical techniques. Do you think if we have a certain number of practitioners cleaned, then they're likely to serve clients better? I don't know whether these things are adding up. Are you seeing the linkages? I would read it the other way. This one, I'm doing the planning part, so then you see it. Okay, let me read the pathway. So we want to get to declining mobility. So let's see this one. Maybe this will make sense. Declining clinical training curriculum, develop clinical training curriculum. So that is the input we need. We must have the clinical training curriculum, but that developing alone may not lead there. So what do we need to do? It is there. So we need to conduct training events. Training events, and we want to link, on the clinical techniques. Now, conducting training events on its own may not lead to declining mobility. We need to do certain things. So let's look at that. Assuming this is what we did, and we want to see the results of this, the immediate output of conducting training. Just like ours here, we'll be saying 25 practitioners trained in new clinical technique. Are they linked? I don't know whether that makes sense now. Conduct training events. Then the immediate results, like our class will be saying, how many people have been trained by the end of the day. For this case, we are saying, if you conducted those training, then you may want to check as immediate results, how many practitioners were trained by the end of that training session. Do they link together? Hey, I don't know whether, am I alone? Nora, go ahead. Talk about the entire result chain. How do you understand it?
It makes sense because you said for the planning part.
Yes.
I think you said we work backwards from the impact backwards towards the input.
Sure. When planning.
Now, yes. So this one makes sense because we start at, we want to reduce the mobility in target population. Then when executing now, we work forward.
Thank you. So that is the implementation part. And planning is normally very difficult. This is why we say if you don't plan well, Nora, complete.
Yes.
Complete.
No, I just had a question between the output and outcome.
Yes.
I don't know if I heard you say that outcome is the immediate.
No, I talked about intermediate.
The intermediate results.
But this terminology could be confusing. See it as a result of output. You know, whether you use it all this, maybe if those are a bit confusing, yes. So immediate results are actually the outputs. And then, of course, we talk about intermediate. The terminology could be a bit confusing. So just see from the output, you need to get the outcome, which are actually preceding. Yes.
Okay, I was confusing between the output and the outcome, which comes first, but now I understand that outcome is a result of the output.
Thank you. That's how we should look at it in a very simplified way. But as we are moving on, you'll be able to see all those terminologies. And I'm using them interchangeably, so then we see them. I have
yes,
Sylvia.
I also have...
Okay. Who is speaking?
This is Wekesa.
Wekesa, go ahead. Yes.
I'm also confused somewhere here because we have the process and the input. Why can't we just put that part of conducting or conduct training events under the inputs? Because under the inputs, you say that.
In fact, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Change it to activity. Change it to activity. You cannot do it minus the activity. So we are saying, I have just brought in another word. So remove it now and put the activity. So we are saying what activity, several activities will come here. And those activities also gives us the process. So they're just interchange of words. So we are saying for you to get to impact, you cannot get there without some planned activity. Are we right? And we need the process. I've just used the word, what process leads you there? So see it as an activity. I don't know if that clarifies that.
Yes, I've now gotten you.
Okay. Any other? There was, I don't know, Sylvia, did you speak?
No, I didn't. I'm here.
Okay, please.
Could you explain the model again? I think I got confused. I thought you were starting from the impact, but in real sense, you were starting from the input. Could you
Thank you. Fine. So, and this is why we have an assignment here. Now, there is the way to plan. Normally, when you plan, you don't plan with activity in mind. Okay? You plan with what do you want to achieve? Okay, let me put it outside this. If you plan with activity that if I bring this bottle that I have here, then I'll get there. No, it is like, what do I want to achieve? Then I would be able to say, if I had this bottle, then I can get there. Okay. So in that case, for planning, we normally talk about, call this impact. I'm using different terms. Let me come to where you are. So think about the goal. Why the project? Okay. Look at that question that I've asked in terms of the goal. And then after the goal, then you ask, because resources are limited, you cannot do everything. The next question that you ask, then what must I do? Or what do I need to do to get to this goal? In that case, then you're talking about the outcomes, the what must be done, or the purpose level. Then from output to input, it's how will I do it? And the how here, begin to talk about the immediate result that you have to plan for. You need to plan for that because that will tell you which activities will deliver that. Input, look at them like resources. You cannot do an activity without certain finances. You need the venues like this class. We needed this means of, as a resource so that we have actually today's session taking place. I don't know that that takes you there. So you plan from, knowing the goal, but how do you implement? To operationalize, once you have known where you are heading, then you start saying, hey, let me test it with my how. So you assemble, you already know your activities, you already know your output that you deliver, you already know your outcome. So the pathways, you can see where the arrow is pointing. It is implemented, that is what we call the pathway. So the pathway means, since I know the activities, I have to list all the resources that I need to conduct the activities. And I would have to put this together and tell me, hey, so what results will they produce? At that point, you produce your work plan, and a work plan that is result-based. And once you have done, you have up to the output, you have no control what outcome would be or what impact would be. But this is why we say, if activities are right and they are going to give you the result that you want, there is a high likelihood that the outcome that you have planned will come. Remember, somewhere we said we have control and we do not have control. We have control of how many participants are going to be in this class. But what you will do with this course, we have no control. You have different goals for this course. I don't know that that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Anyone else? Anyone? Okay, Hussein, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ndugu Walter. So I have demystified in my own understanding based on a project that I was handling. So I said the input in this case is develop a manual for training and then identify the trainers. We said the process is carry out the training. And then the output, I said 700 teachers trained on CBC and play-based learning. Then the outcome is said increase the teachers' confidence, improved learner engagement, improved teacher skills. Then the impact, I said improved foundational learning, increased enrollment, and then improved community engagement. I don't know.
I would ask, don't demystify that. What I would ask you, how does increased, so try to link me to increased enrollment with what you have just said, increased enrollment. The others might be right. How does that bring in increased enrollment? If
increased enrollment, okay, fine. The increased enrollment is my impact, the final impact. Now, how it has been arrived into is after the teachers' skills and ability and the confidence has been improved through training. The rumors is going around that the school is doing well.
Okay. If it is based that way, that might also happen. But I would also imagine somebody else might also think increased enrollment might come much later. Could be because of facilities, not necessarily, but part of facility or infrastructure is also the teacher. So it is also okay, the way you have framed it. Yes, it is justified.
Okay. Thank you.
Nora, ask question here.
Thank
because it's going to be interesting, and this is something we have to do hands-on. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to ask again from Hussein's example, and also from what we've been talking about. In planning, when you're talking about the impact, how many impacts are we supposed to have for a single project?
Okay.
And I'm assuming that we can, if we choose just one impact, we might have so many activities that are tied to that contribute, not activities, so many outcomes that will contribute to that one impact. In the part of implementation, do we have more, having many outcomes will resort to having very many activities? So in implementation, do we run with one activity at a time, or do we do all at a time? I don't know now, how does it work?
In fact, sometimes you are likely to come up with a spillover effect, and you cannot implement only one. The only thing is, that is why we say dependencies. So first of all, to answer the question whether one impact or more, that depends on what you want to achieve. In the learning outcomes, I'm sure it is not one. There could be several, 1, 2, 3. But the more they are, the more you are likely also to get dependencies. Remember, as a result of just learning school, you might also get economic value, isn't it? The people that have been trained actually would become productive members of the society, but that might not be an immediate thing that you are targeting. You are targeting better learners or learners with improved skill, but coincidentally, as a result of improved skills, they will get better employment or they will contribute to national development. So you get the spillovers effect coming in here. So that is defining what does the project stand for. So whether 1 or 2 is a bit debatable. Some people may just have one. For that matter, one broad impact, which can still be broken down into other. So, but the thing is, the more they are, the more the impact, the more the outcome should also be, because each and every outcome should, or maybe 1 or 2, it is also possible to get 1, 2 outcome contributing to those several impact in itself. But in a situation that you don't get, then the outcome themselves must link directly to the impact, must contribute to the impact. Again, coming down, each and every outcome, now this is the danger again, the more they are, every outcome must have its own output, which could be 1 or 2. So you can be able to see the more you're building, the huger this thing is going to be and more complex. So it is safer for you just to narrow and use broad terminologies that allows you to be able, because even that in itself would also come with the indicators. And we say the more the indicators, the more trouble you're bringing yourself into. So the fewer they are, the better. But that does not mean if the few does not sort out your problem, you limit them to the few. But you have to bear that in mind. And the more the outputs are, the larger the number of activities are going to be, and the more huge the resources are going to be themselves. So it is a bit a debatable part, but if they serve in a result-based, remember again the dependencies. The more they start becoming many, the more you'll be able to find, oh, this data ought to have fitted here. So you have to be very careful how you formulate that. The smart aspect.
Okay. Thank you.
I have something to ask again.
Okay,
Mr.
Go ahead.
Basing on what Mr. Hussein has given us as the output from his project and the model you have given us right now, I see that the output indicator that you are giving is quantitative. Must it be always quantitative, or it can also be qualitative indicator?
Not necessarily. I have just apparently used this as a simpler example. But remember, this is a very low level. Many times is a very low level. Many times you are likely to find this lower level is actually quantitative. As you are going higher, it is going to get very complex. Let me give you an example. You are looking at, I've just picked one, looking at 20. Remember, there are several outputs here. Then we are looking at the Kenyan context as it is getting that higher level. you'd probably most likely find as you're moving towards outcome and impact, then they become more qualitative. But I wouldn't say it's the definition. It depends on what, because like if it were money you are looking at, I don't think if there's any other way. Okay, money you can equate it to qualitative. I mean, you can use percentages in that case, but even percentage can be translated into qualitative nature. So it depends on what are you measuring.
It's okay. It's okay now.
Okay. Any other? Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Up.
Okay, fine. Go ahead, please.
Yes, this is Docilla. So there's a situation where there's a project that I'm meant to undertake. We've had increased cases of indiscipline, and every week on Thursday we have disciplinary committees sitting down. We wanted to reduce these among students. So I decided to come up with a project, and I used this logical model. In the inputs, I developed a training curriculum for peer counselors.
Okay.
And then in the process, conducted training on peer counseling. On the output from a population of 30 students were trained on how to guide and counsel fellow students and became peer counselors. The outcome was that there were reduced cases of the disciplinary committee meetings every week, and the final impact is that we've had a decline in disciplinary issues in our school among the boys.
It can even go broader than that. You have brought in something that I thought you are not going to mention that. Look at the way you have tailored this. You have talked about decreased number of disciplinary committee. In fact, I was even thinking you're going to talk about decreased incidences of disciplinary cases, which again still translate to what you have actually talked about, but it depends on it. But then look at it. That is one aspect in terms of impact. Can you link disciplinary to results? Is it also possible?
Yes.
So that could also be one impact, but now in this case, this is very specific. What were you looking at? Overall, you are more focused on disciplinary, but I want to believe at some point maybe there could also be the issue of, change in grades or results, better grades or something like that, maybe as a result of that. Because if I ask broadly, are you just, or were you just interested in disciplinary, or this disciplinary was targeting something better?
Yeah, the disciplinary issues also affecting performance.
So that could be one thing that you are looking at the end game, so that as much as reduced disciplinary cases, ultimately, so what? Because that's the question somebody's asked. Is the school attractive to people, and attractive why? Because performance are getting better.
Okay.
So indicators of performance must be measured, must be checked into and agreed upon. What is the school looking at? Is it just disciplinary and that full stop? Maybe yes or no. I want to believe if those two are tied together, you may really get a proper impact into that. Because if you're going to do an evaluation, it is going to be, yes, disciplinary, but what do you link disciplinary to? So let's try to link what you have brought in with the SDG. The SDG talk about certain learning indicator. I don't know whether you can recall any.
Continuous learning is an aspect.
Transition, is it transition? Transition, I think, is more, yes. I think that is one way in which Kenyan contribute to the learning outcomes in the SDG. Transition 100%, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think there is also the issue of gender and so on and so forth. I do not know how gender is really treated for that matter, but those are some of the things you can actually be able to bring in. Any questions? So then we move on. I don't know whether we are clear on that. I have some more examples that some are more complex, some are a bit simpler. Can I move on? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me see if there's one that is a bit simpler here again. So let's see this. Now, apparently I've used ones that are more in health. So I'm going to jump this. Maybe I have one that is not really on health. Let's see what is here. It's all on health. Okay, you can look at this example. I think because I'm going to give you these assignments, so then you develop and we see. We are going to discuss this. So let's look at, that was vertical. This is really trying to put this thing we are talking about in the vertical part. And vertical here means beginning to plan from impact, outcome, output. Then of course we shall be able to implement. So the vertical thinking, that's what we talked about. Okay, let me see the horizontal thinking. So horizontal logic links the program level to objectively verifiable indicator. That is basically what we simply talk about, means of verifications and assumptions. So think of that, the indicator itself, and then means of verification and the assumption. So that is the vertical matrix going that way. It defines how the objectives specified in the first column of the log frame, goal, purpose, output, will be measured. Column 2, and how they will be verified. This provides a framework for activity monitoring and evaluation. Now, so here, to formulate what we had seen in the logic there, you have to think laterally. So two thinking here, the lateral thinking and the horizontal thinking. Actually, there's a third thinking. So this is lateral thinking. If you have to develop the horizontal logic, you have to think laterally. This is a bit easier. The one that is much tougher is actually the vertical thinking. So require lateral thinking because we are dealing with stakeholders and external influence over which we have no control. So that's why you have to think that way. So two systems. And look at the vertical thinking, the horizontal thinking, and of course the lateral thinking. Now, let me repeat this. You can see the two lower levels here are basically monitoring, constitute the monitoring system. And you cannot have an evaluation system without monitoring system. The two higher levels are actually the evaluation thinking. Now, what I meant by the lateral thinking is this. Now, we are saying, how do we get to the goal? So see the arrows. I'm starting from down here in the implementation, going upwards. Now we are saying for us to get to the goal, then we need inputs which allow us to do the activities. And these activities, we have to formulate or have certain assumptions, even though many times activities or input don't have assumptions. And yes, these are some. Okay, so we are saying at this point, we need an assumptions that if it turns that the inputs are available and these inputs have allowed us to conduct certain activities, then we shall be able to get the outputs. The outputs themselves have the KPIs, the indicators, the second column there, and every indicator has a means of verification. So look at the lateral thinking still. Output activities we need certain assumptions that if it turns to be true, then the output here would be achieved. And the output here, if they are to be achieved and these assumptions hold, then the outcomes would be achieved. 2, 3, 4 outcomes that we have articulated here, if they remain true and the assumptions hold, then the goal would be achieved. And the assumptions on the goal part are many times for sustaining the project. Many times, very high level policy remains relevant or something like that. So this is what we call the lateral thinking. Is there any question on that? Okay. So that is, I'm just showing it again, how the arrow, maybe you didn't see how the arrow moves. Those are the thinking, that is a monitoring system. And then of course, the last one, basically just demonstrating the evaluation system itself. So this is how you feel the log frame. Now, critical to this is how you feel that log frame. This is the numbering. The numbering dictates the logic, how to feel it. And I think because of time, I would spare that time. So then we do this. And then, of course, this is where our assignment is going to come. Then you'll give me some little time, I talk about it. So you start by knowing the impact. That's number one. From impact, you'll have to understand, formulate the impact at the why, then you formulate your outcomes, 1, 2, 3, which are the what. And then, of course, that would brings you to the outputs, the how. You stop there. once you have stopped there, you start formulating the preconditions which are the assumption columns. And once you have formulated this, the precondition, the necessary conditions for that, you start with the output preconditions, which are number 5 here. Then you go to the outcome preconditions. And of course, if you like, somewhere I'm going to talk about why I've not put the assumption for the impact. So we are in number 5. And once you have done this, the next thing that you're going to do is to come up with the indicators for each level of results. That is 7, 8, 7. Each indicator must have means of verification. That's I'm talking about 7, 8, then 9, 10, 11, 12. And once you have done 12, so you have your output level. Once you have your outputs, until you have outputs, you may not go to activities. But once you have your output, then you'll formulate your activities. So from 12, you come to 13. You may not necessarily have indicators for this and their means, so we may jump, in some of them we may jump, but somehow for our example, try to come up with them. And then of course, relevant assumption for the activities. I don't know that this makes sense. So this is how we fill our log frame. I've simplified it again. Let me just show how I simplified it. Then you ask the question. So I've said the block diagram summarizes the logical framework is filled in. The numbers refer to the order in which it should really be filled in. I've simplified it. Let me go through that. Then you see it again. So if you did not get it well, this is what I have here, and it still moves on. And of course, sequence. So let me explain the sequence, then you can ask me anything. So the objective column is filled first by working from top. And you had seen that. Let me go back again. This is what I said, the 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is what I'm saying. The objective column is filled first by working from top. This information should come from problem and objective analysis or a program strategy option. We talked about it. The logic is that if an activity is delivered, okay, let me take you, and output is received, then the project purpose is realized and contribution to impact is assured. Now, this is what I'm saying. If that is the case, then we are saying the activity or the inputs are there, the outputs would actually be delivered here, and that should be able to give us the outcome and the impact. Remember the arrow that I showed there. Now, the logic of the log frame is based on the achievement of one level objective leading to higher level objective. So that is the hierarchy as you go up in terms of the implementation or operationalizing that. And I've just shown that. So this is what we are saying there in terms of planning, but in terms of implementation, maybe I have it, okay? I think this is for planning. When you're implementing, I think you showed that the assumptions are filled first, then that assumption for activity leads you to the output, and output assumption leads you to the purpose, and purpose assumption leads you to the goal. Many times we don't have an assumption for the goal itself because it is indeed implied for that. Okay, second and third column, which is basically this one here. So let me take you the second to the third column, which is this one here. I'm taking you back a little bit so that you see it of the log frame. This is what, okay, so here it is. The second and the third column here. So this is what I'm referring to. So bear this one in mind as the fourth column, so then we don't come back to it. So we are saying here, okay, should be filled in horizontally. That is the indicators and the means of verification. They go together. Once you know the indicator, the means of verification should follow to establish the basis for measuring an effectiveness and clarity of the objective. Indicator used in the logical framework must be clear and measurable. In other words, the word SMART should come in. It is one of the stepping stones used to manage the link between levels. It forms the basis of project monitoring and evaluation, just like how we have seen into the system there. Now, starting from the top to the bottom of the hierarchy of the objective, begin to work across the log frame. That is the horizontal thinking that we talked about. Identifying the objectives, verifiable indicator for measuring the progress in terms of quantity, quality, and time. And this is what I'm simply saying. We have filled this column. Now we work across, the horizontally to be able to get KPIs and source of our means of verification. Again, I've used a different terminology, so then you just see how that goes in. Now, so we had talked about this, and I don't want to take you onto this, just trying to qualify what I had indicated there and how they are formulated. But let me talk a little bit about source and means of verification. Should be considered and specified at the same time as the formulation of indicator. So you can never have an indicator without means of verification or source of data. This will help to test whether or not the indicator can be realistically measured or you have access to the data. The SOV, source of verification, different terminology again, should specify how, who and when the information will really be gathered. That's what we mean there. Now, activity, raw is filled as the last after all components have been agreed on. This ensures that objective, not activity, lead the project. This is why I say you don't think about the activity first, but you think about why the intervention. If you ever think about activity for your planning, activity to lead to output, no, that is a wrong thinking. You should think about the outcome or the impact, then the outcome, then the output. And at that point, now you can think about what activity then will deliver that. I don't know whether that is really clear. Activities are written, we had said written action with active verb, supports objectives and link to output. Some activity come from results of filling in assumptions, indicators, and evidence column. Now, assumptions, and we are nearly there to be able to take our assignment. At the backbone of the project strategy, there are positive statements about the conditions that need to be met if the activity is to stay on track. Good M&E requires clear and valid assumption which describes conditions that if they do not occur, may jeopardize the project. So that's the beauty of this. Think of assumption first as a risk. I did talk about this sometimes. Look at them as a risk and then frame them in the positive way to be able really to get the assumption. Check that assumptions are clearly out of control of the project. If they are within control, then no, they are not assumptions. They must really be beyond the project control. Like friendly government policy. A project may not have control of government policies, but they can influence in one way or the other. They reflecting up the bottom of the log frame. That's what we said, how to formulate them. Consider how if each assumption holds, it will be possible to move to the next stage. I've just mentioned that in the lateral thinking. Assumptions are external factors that have the potential to influence or determine the success of project. They are usually progressively identified during the analysis phase. So in that case, we do the stakeholders analysis to be able to come with them. So this is the lateral thinking and how to formulate the assumptions, what we just did now. And I'm not going to repeat it because we did talk about it that time. And this is more or less that framework, how then it comes. So you can actually see this I picked from one of the World Bank matrix in SAP, just to give you that example. And I've used some source data here just to help you pick one or two. They may not be aligned, but if you have time, you can look at this and be able to see this. Now, lastly, revisit your assumption regularly to adjust or remove those that are no longer valid and add those that have emerged. Focus on assumption probability you are uncertain. This must be monitored as they could endanger the project. That's when you talk about project risk. Limit assumption to only those critical for success through a risk assessment analysis in itself. And this is what you need to do within the risk analysis. I'm not going to go through it. So think of it, how to formulate an assumptions. And of course, we'll actually limit the risk and come up with proper assumption for that. So you have to do a proper risk analysis, which is basically what I've also mentioned in the algorithm here. And in summary, a set of logic testing questions should be developed and applied at each project level during development of a log frame. In order to keep the matrix as a concise summary of what activity aimed to do rather than how it would be done, the matrix should not include a listing of work program or tasks required to produce the output. Matrix completion must be approached as an iterative process, and you need to know that in mind. And this is where our assignment comes in. Just before I take you through that in a very short while, around 5 minutes in this. So we have our first group assignment here to take you over. I don't know how you do your group assignment, but since we have gone through that matrix, two things in one, the logic, the log frame itself, but we want to put data into that logical framework. So then we start to work on our individual project at the same. So as you're working on this group work, just to allow you to do this is basically what you'll transfer into your individual work. So for now, I've made it group for sharing and so on. So develop a log frame matrix for you choose an organization as a group. Apply the rules for filling the log frame learned so far. I'm not going to dictate what results. You can agree on what results or what intervention you want to do. And then assignment 2. Use the log frame so far developed to complete the performance monitoring. In other words, what I'm aiming here, once you have developed that log frame in your group, go ahead and develop performance monitoring plans and evaluation plan. We have not discussed that, but I think by the time you do it, we shall have actually in the next class, we shall really be able to discuss this. So I have completed that by saying you are encouraged to continue doing this work as well as the model assignments, which I have shared, and this would be shown to you. And I'm going to talk about it very briefly. And to conclude that, it becomes the basis for writing your proposal, preparing terms of reference, monitoring planned work, project evaluation. I will go back to the assignment, so then you ask me a question that does this. I'm not going to talk about the strengths here. This one you can actually be able to read on your own, and even some of the limit, maybe a few of these. So some of the limitations for the log frame as compared to other tools that are also available, focus too much on problem rather than opportunity and the vision, limited attention to the problem of uncertain where learning or adaptive approach or project is required. Risk of entirely poorly thought through set of activity. And I think we have talked about that. We've seen the possibility for that. I think we have talked about this. Maybe in terms of the timing, monitoring and evaluation, when does it come? We have a session on types of evaluation, so spare it there. But remember, this is what is going to form the basis for monitoring and, of course, the basis for evaluation. And this terminology that I've put here would come much clearer at that time. So I don't want to talk about this thing. You can start reading them, but of course, as we are moving ahead, we shall be able to see where it really fits in very well. So I want to stop it there, maybe get some questions, then I take you to the real individual assignment, which Rita would also share. Remember, I don't know whether there's a question on group work, the group work here, so that we are clear on this. Are we clear on the group assignment? This would be done in group, but whatever you do in group, again, would also constitute individual work, where you pick your own project and actually start modeling this, and we shall be flowing with the same. Let me hear if there are reactions to the group assignment. If there isn't, then I think Rita would be able to share. I think with the possibly in the slides deck, you'll be able to find this, and that constitutes our individual assignments, which would be submitted. We shall discuss how we progress. Let this not look like something to punish you. This is really how, at the end of the class, you would have actually come up with your M&D plan, which you can actually try to test when you go back. So that would be the product of this particular class. So try as much as nobody is going to follow you that much, that you come up with it. But we are going to agree, I think, as a class, the modality for assessing this, because of the number. I would want to leave it at that point, given the time, and hand it over to Rita. And I think from me, I'm not sure if Rita would say this is the last class, then mine would be just to wish you all the best during these Christmas seasons. I would be in Kenya. Maybe we have not met physically. Some of you may recognize me. If you recognize me, please. I never saw your faces, so I don't know whether I would be able to remember, but please, if you see me, just say hi. Thank you, and have a happy and Merry Christmas. Over to you, Rita. Unless there are questions. Let me open for questions, please, fast. Is there questions before Rita comes in? Seemingly not. I think, okay. Okay, so let me take these questions, then Rita will come in. Let me start with Hussein, over to you.
Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best, the same. On the grouping, how have we been, grouped? Because we don't know the group members for each
Thank you. I think Rita will take that. Okay, so is that the question only? Is that the only question?
I just wanted
I also
to
have a
understand that.
question.
Okay, so okay, Sylvia, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do we get to like email or ask questions and get some private sessions in case we did not understand something? Do you allow that or no?
Okay, a very good one. Rita would respond to that, but I think I've said I would be in Kenya. You know, this is the good thing about being a facilitator. You have my number and all this. Just ask me. So this is outside the class, but for the purposes of your understanding, please call me. I'll be able to clarify. Because some of you really are working with real projects, share with me. I can review wherever I am. And of course, we can be able to discuss. I think I would give that room for you.
Okay, thank you.
Over to you, Rita.
Okay, thank you so much, Walter, and thank you so much, our students. Allow me to call you students for now, for making this class to happen. Yeah, so Frank will share the number. So a few announcements. Allow me to make a few announcements. First, we have two assignments that have been given by our lead facilitator. We have the group assignment and the individual assignment. So we're going to create 6 groups of 6 groups of 6 to 7 members each, because we are roughly, is it 35 or 38? So some groups will have 6 members, others will have 7. So we'll share the different groups, then you'll pick your group leads. Then all the notes and all the recordings will be available on our e-learning platform. Some notes are already there up to last week. So today's notes will be available on our e-learning platform. Then we've created a new WhatsApp group. Kindly allow us to share in the larger group. I don't know how best you want us to do, so that once we post it there, you can join, because currently we have the larger group that has more than 100 people. So we'll share the new created WhatsApp group so that members can join. Then the university, we are closing on the 19th. Yeah, we are private university, so we operate till almost the last day. So we are closing on Friday for the Christmas break, then opening on 6th. And I know some of you, or where you are working, I know the class has half of the learners are also teachers. So we are closing on Friday, but for us, we are closing today. Then we'll be opening on the 13th. So you have 3 weeks break. The 2 major assignments, I think, are enough for us to interact with the notes shared and come up with a log frame and all the other assignments that have been given by our facilitator. So we'll close today, our last class, then we'll resume on the 13th of January. Hope that's fine with you. We have quite a number of notes that others have been shared. Others will be shared. And the assignments given. So our next class will be on the 13th of January. Yes. So that's what I have for today. As I've said, our administrator, Brenda, will share the groups. And as I've said, we'll have 6 groups of 6 to 7 members per group. Yes. Thank you. Ismail, I'm seeing you've raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, Rita, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I hear that you say that I normally see that the lecture is being recorded. And
Yes,
when
yes,
I
yes.
check I don't see this recording. Where does it go? I only see the PDF PDF notes only. Where does the recording go?
Okay,
I'm referring to the audio because I want to maybe like today I was late a bit and I want to maybe go back and listen again.
Okay.
Is it
Allow me to check.
possible to find the the audio clip.
Okay, okay. Ismail, after this, maybe allow me by tomorrow morning to confirm that all the recordings for all our sessions, the 5 or so classes, the recordings will be updated by tomorrow morning, please. If not, you have my personal number. Please confirm that with me, please.
Okay, noted.
Yes. Okay, thank you. George?
Yes, good evening, Rita.
Good evening, George.
My question goes to you on the group formation.
Yes.
It will be during the formation, at least. I look at here, most people are teachers. I come from a different management, or I'm a HR by profession. And then the grouping will favor me if I learn myself into teaching team. That's my question.
Okay. But in the class assignments, I think when the assignment that has been given will not really restrict, because you'll decide as a group. I don't think you'll really focus on an education related project or whichever way, because we have individual projects and group projects here. So the purpose of the group projects is just to learn from each other, if that's okay with you. Yeah.
Okay. I'm guided.
Yes. Or someone has asked for our facilitator's number. Kindly allow me, give me a minute. I share on the platform. And I don't know whether Brenda can also share the WhatsApp link here so that members can be able to join our new WhatsApp group, so that at least we have the correct WhatsApp group where we can share more conversations on the correct group. Yeah. So here is the number of our facilitator. Any other question? So if you have no questions, kindly allow me to wish you happy holidays. Yeah, for those traveling, journey masses, and we'll all resume our classes on the 13th of January. Thank you so much and have a nice evening.
Thank you as well, Ms. Rita, and you too. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Thank you.
You too.
Anytime.
Anko kwanza ndio alinicall kanifanyia kitu nikamwambia siko kwa keja jiani nikikama
Rita, thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Okay, welcome so much, Hussein. Hope to see you all on the 13th of January.
Yeah. Actually, that's it. So we also wish all the best to the rest of the members. As the president, I want to see everybody back safe. Come next year, inshallah, 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then we want to wish in a special way our facilitator, Walter Oma.
Okay.
We really appreciate you. You have been taking us through in a manner that it is much professional. Thank you very much.
Thank you.